All right. Let's move to new business. We have some resignations. We have to wait for Lewis, right?
So I can do this. So I think we have just the one resignation to acknowledge. It's listed as Rachel Cross. Family reasons. This is an incredible loss for the district. We actually reached out to Rachel to say you often can ask for a second year of leave, and we probably in your case would grant it. That's a choice, but she very much is focused on what's very important in family and her budding family. But I think it's a fair statement that this is one of our stars in our constellation who has made a very good decision, but won't be with us as a result of that decision. I don't know if you want to add anything, Lewis, or I know Laura had to leave.
No, that's
Mike
exactly
wants to
right.
add because it's preschool. But go ahead.
Well, I'll let Mike tell the bulk of it, but yes, the board has the ability to approve second years of leave under the contract for teachers who are out on maternity leaves, unpaid, obviously. And she chose not to for excellent reasons, but we will miss her very much. I've never sort of kept nudging somebody quite this way, but we will miss her. It is a big loss, and be hard to fill those shoes.
Can I have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education acknowledge the resignation of Rachel Cross effective February 1, 2020.
Second. Thank you, Hillary. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Tony. We are putting forward a new course that has gone through the curriculum committee, AP Human Geography. This would replace a low enrollment AP course in the Social Studies Department, European History, which has not had the numbers over the years. We expect there'll be student interest in this particular course. It's a very challenging course. And like I said, we talked about this in the curriculum committee. Mrs. Wolak is here as well if there are questions about the course. So essentially, in terms of FTE, this would not be this would be cost neutral in terms of the FTE.
Mm-hmm. Can we have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the new course proposal for AP Human Geography.
Thank you, Gina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Now we have a preliminary report from the school climate survey.
What's coming around is just I realized after I had submitted the presentation that one of the slides on the slideshow was a little outsized on the page. So this is a proper view of the slide. You'll know it when you get to it in the presentation,
Right.
just so you can see all the information. So it is, there is the presentation here on the screen. If it's okay, I'm going to sit and do this. Is that all right? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the
You're not in the way, Tony. Sure. You're not in the way. Nope. Your head's not in the way.
Okay, so just a little bit of context here. This is intended to be an overview of the survey that we did, so that everyone understands. We engaged with the National School Climate Center for a survey of school climate. That survey is something that is required of school districts under Connecticut statutes related to school climate. Weston had gone a few years without doing a survey, and when we did look at doing the survey, we decided to go with the National School Climate Center, which is really the gold standard in surveys, which we'll talk a little bit about regarding school climate. The survey itself addresses school climate, which they define as the quality and character of school life related to norms, values, social interactions, and organizational structures as experienced by members of the school community. So, as you know, the board has a school climate policy, 5131. That definition is very much aligned to the board's policy. And our survey was provided to all students in grades 3 through 12, as well as all parents and all staff in the district. It was done online over a series of weeks. And so what we're going to give tonight is an overview of that information. Just a little bit about the survey itself. It was developed by the National School Climate Center, which is really a leader in the field of school climate, working with various departments of education across the country and thousands of school districts. Their mission is to educate and improve school climate with a vision of having all students be socially, emotionally, and intellectually prepared and contributing citizens to our society. So you can see the alignment of the survey with really the district goals as well. And the survey itself, the Comprehensive School Climate Inventory, is based on research, and that is truly what makes it one of the most outstanding measures of school climate that is available. It's been validated as a valid survey by the American Psychological Association, as well as a couple of other groups there. And what is also helpful with this survey is if we do choose to use it moving forward, the information that we learn here can serve as a baseline for future surveys. The survey itself is divided into 13 dimensions. This is the slide that is improperly sized on the screen, but is correct in front of you. It's actually helpful to have it as a separate handout anyway, because this slide is really the basis for what the survey is measuring among our students, staff, and parents across the district. The 13 dimensions are broken up into categories of safety, teaching and learning, interpersonal relationships, institutional environment, social media, and then there's a staff section that deals with leadership and professional relationships. Interestingly, the last time I did the survey, social media was not on here. So that was a recent addition to the survey that really reflects, I think, just the nature of school climate and the, how our society has evolved. So that you understand the way the survey is organized. Some of you probably took the survey. There was a series of questions related to each of these dimensions, and those questions correlated across surveys. So for example, under the category of rules and norms, the student question was, in my school there are clear rules against physically hurting people, and you had a series of strongly disagree to strongly agree. The staff version was, in this school there are clear rules against, and then the parent version was, in my child's school there are clear rules against. So those questions are then correlated to one another, and when we get our very in-depth reports, this is an overview, there are very in-depth reports at the building level, you can actually see how those questions were answered by those constituents, and it's very helpful. Social and civic learning, similar kind of alignment in the questions. Just a sample, in my school, adults teach me how to express my emotions in proper ways. The staff version, in this school, adults teach students to express their emotions in proper ways. So you can see the alignment there. And then just graphically, you can see this all fits into one giant puzzle. So the dimensions in this survey fit together. They are all related. They are all interrelated. And we'll talk a little bit about that more as we go through the survey, through the results here. The process that the National School Climate Center outlines is here. It's not a unique process, but it is an important one in terms of we prepared for the survey, which really involved our administrative team, Craig and I, working to make sure that everything was ready to go. We did the evaluation, we did the survey, we've gotten the results, we're reporting on them, and the next step will be to move into action planning at the building level and district level, which our building principals have already started doing. Currently, we've had a meeting within the past 2 weeks. They've begun to review their building-based data and look at how to interpret that data and address areas for possible improvement. This is just a little bit more about that process, but just in terms of looking at the data, planning for the change, getting the proper evaluation and assessment information, interpreting that, and then drilling down to key priorities and using evidence-based practices to inform the action plans and then assess how that's going. So it's a good process and one that really can be continuous. So overall, what we'll see, and we'll get into some results on the next couple slides, is the school profiles will show strengths and needs. How positive are the overall ratings? What dimensions are at the top and the bottom? How do our perceptions compare for different populations? And then looking at variability, which groups show variability, if any, and individual differences and divergences in the perceptions, which is quite interesting. Just a little bit of orientation to the way the results are presented. It's on all the results will be presented on a 5-point scale. 0 to 2.5 is considered negative, 2.5 to 3.5 is considered neutral, and 3.5 to 5 is considered positive. All right, so we'll talk about that more in a minute, and what we'll see is just some different trends. So just a bit on the response rates, which were very high, and I have one correction here that Ms. Laura Cadis caught for us. The Hurlbut Elementary School parent participation denominator is not 261, it is 375. So if you would like, and we'll get a corrected page, but sure. So the denominator in the Hurlbut Elementary School parent response is not 261, it's actually 375, which brings the overall response rate to just about 31%, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the other response rates there. So the School Climate Center is making that correction for us. So when we talk about response rates, we want as close to 100% as possible. When we met with the National School Climate Center, they were very, very impressed with our parent response rates. They shoot for 40%, 30% is considered valid. Oftentimes they're dealing with single-digit percentages and low teens. So they thought that the 30% in and of itself was an indication as to the involvement of the community, which is very positive. You can see also the student and staff responses there are very high in their percentage, and therefore we believe that these are a good and valid measurement for us. So the first slide here is the climate scores by population. So if you just orient yourself to this graph, if you haven't already, across the bottom you see the dimensions, and on the y-axis you see 2, 3, 4, and 5, and those are the indicators. You'll notice that 1 is not on there. So if you can sort of draw a line between 3, I can do it, sort of right around there, 3.5-ish. Anything above that is considered to be positive. From 2.5 to 3.5 is considered to be neutral. Anything below 2.5, which they only give us a little bit there, is considered to be in the negative range. So broad strokes, the very, very positive news here is that these results are incredibly positive. To have our Weston's lowest perception ratings are in the neutral range, which is quite an achievement there. A couple other interesting just first impressions looking at this data. So if you look at the safety rules and norms, and then the sense of physical security, which fall under that safety domain, you see very high ratings, and in fact pretty closely aligned ratings, particularly around sense of physical security, meaning that students, adults feel safe within the school system, which is a very positive thing. You see here on sense of social emotional security and social media, those are the two lowest ratings. What's that?
They connected?
They could be.
Right.
We have to do some little bit more exploration. That's where getting the question by question analysis can be very helpful. Nationally speaking, when you look at national data, it is the sense of social emotional security that is the typically the one that is falling lower than other rankings for the district. Now, I would describe that as a relative weakness here. I mean, it's still neutral, which is not negative, but it could also, there's also room for improvement there. Other things just to point out, you see in the support for learning and the social and civic learning, you can start to ask some interesting questions here. It's not unusual for staff to be the highest, have the highest perception of those domains. That is what they're doing every single day. The question that we may start to ask is, how do we leverage the staff's high perception of these things to make sure that our parents and our students also feel that same high level, right? That could be one question. A lot of times what these things bring out is the need for example, communication or understanding, explanation simply even sometimes. You look at respect for diversity, for example, you see, again, a lot of alignment there. Very positive to see. Not only is it positive, but it's also nice to see that people are on the same page, so to speak, with that information. So you can see that this is just, this is by population, very, very broad strokes, and gives a very general overview of what we have in the district. Climate scores by school, you can start to see, so this breaks it down, high school, intermediate school, Weston High School. There is a little bit more variability here. WIS scores are higher in most cases than both the intermediate and the middle. So that's an interesting perception. We'd want to explore that and see, how do we build on that. You can see social emotional security. There is a dip here from, I'm sorry, that's the next slide I'm going to talk about. Social emotional security still is on the lower side here. And we then, in these box lines, we see a lot of alignment. So interesting to see those perceptions. Looking at the scores by grade. So these are the student scores by dimension across all the grades. Couple things that jumped out immediately. So in grade 4 to 5, you see a dip in social emotional security, kind of comes down, and then it starts to come back up again. So that's interesting. You see in the social and civic learning, a fairly constant line there, 10, 11, and 12, grades 10, 11, and 12. We asked a little bit about that, and it is not uncommon, particularly as students get into the upper grades of high school, that they lose that connection, at least their understanding of the connection between the social and civic part of their learning, because it becomes more about other things like college and like GPAs. So I know how much our high school builds on that social and civic responsibility. That might be an issue of one idea might be just to make sure that that connection is explicit for our kids so they understand it. Might be something to consider. We see here, this is the school connectedness and engagement. I thought that was interesting because it's almost a straight line. It is a straight line from 8, 9, and 10. We've talked a lot in this district about our transition process from school to school. This would indicate that our students believe that they are connected in the same way from 8, 9, and 10. So it's an interesting data point. We might want to explore that. So again, these are very broad strokes. The what's important about this data here is that when we get into the building level reports, which we're not going to go over tonight, the principals are doing that. This data and these responses, not only for the students but also for the faculty and the staff, the faculty and the parents, is sorted in many, many different ways. It's sorted by race and ethnicity. It's sorted by gender. It's sorted by English language learners, by IDEA eligibility. And then when you look at the staff, by the grades they're teaching, by the years of service in the district. So all the information gets sorted in a variety of ways, and it really allows you to get into a lot of detail about interpreting the results. This chart is interesting because what it does is it gives you the ranking by student, staff, or parent, and with each dimension. So a lot of times you can see here, for example, in safety rules and norms, everyone rated that very highly. They felt very high confidence in their perception of that. One that's a little bit different, we might want to explore the support for learning. Students and parents view it the same. Staff views it a little bit differently. That was the one we were talking about earlier. So why is that so high really rated for staff, where parents and students are seeing it a little bit differently? Yeah.
Just a quick question on this one.
Yep.
Is this, clarify for me, this is how the ranking of what is most important in the school environment? Or
It's the highest ranking of their overall ranking. So on the scale of 5, safety rules and norms was the highest.
I thought they ranked them against one another, meaning safety rules and norms was the highest of all those 11.
No, so you can see, for example, we hit, that was the highest by the students, and then we had mentioned earlier that social emotional security was among the lowest, and social media was among the lowest. So you can see that that's
Results were the lowest.
Yes,
I
yeah,
see.
they're
Not
yeah.
how they perceived those categories as per their importance.
correct.
Okay,
Correct.
gotcha.
So overall, just a brief summary. The strengths, safety rules and norms were a major strength across the district. Social support, adults and social support for students were strengths district-wide, and that falls under the broader category of interpersonal relationships, which I think is very interesting because we have talked many times at meetings, board meetings, about the personal relationships and the nature of Weston being so personalized. Areas for potential growth and improvement include sense of social emotional security, social media, and social and civic learning. As I said, it is not uncommon to see a dip, but how do we build on that? We will, from here, unpack the results at the district and school levels. We'll look at themes. We'll connect it with other school data. Our buildings have strong programs around school climate and culture. How has this data been impacted by that, and how can we use those programs to build, improve some of these areas? Some of the questions that teams can ask, and I'll just show you, and this is hard to read, but this is why this is so, one of the things that's so helpful about this survey is that for every dimension, for example, this is social emotional safety, it gives you potential questions and actions you can take as a school-based team around each of these indicators. So this is the benefit of using such a well-researched and widely used survey, that they've been able to amass a set of resources that we now have available to us that school teams can use. There are worksheets, articles, action planning templates, things that each of the school teams in the district now has at their fingertips to help guide their improvement practices. As I said, connecting the school climate data with other data within the district. Just to close, I think the most important part in this slide is just to start somewhere. So what was very interesting to me, and this is a credit to our building administrators, when we were sitting down going over the initial view of this report, one of the administrators said there was a overwhelmingly positive set of responses. I think it was school connectedness. But there was clear that there was literally 8 kids who felt negative about this, and the administrators just said, I don't care about the positives. I want to know who those 8 kids are and get them connected, right? So that it was you can break it down to that level of detail, and credit to them that's what they saw when they looked at that, not the glass that is literally 95% full. What do I do about that 5%? So the next steps, recognize and leverage our strengths and continue to engage our community and integrate this in with our current initiatives and celebrate the good work that's going on while striving to improve. So that's a brief overview, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I just had one question, and I forget what slide it's on. I think it was the slide, if you wouldn't mind going back to it. Oh, well, don't worry about it if you can't. But around participants' response rates.
Yep.
Any comment on, I would have thought that of all the participant groups that would have had the highest response rate, that it would have been it would have been either the students or the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because the students were told they had to do it, and they were given a period of time to fill it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have also thought that, 90% or higher of the staff would have been interested in filling that out.
Mm-hmm.
And not that that's a bad thing that we got in the 40s, but I think it was in the 40s.
Parent.
I don't have the slide in front of me. Can you help me?
sorry,
I don't remember
I
who has
can
it.
go to the computer.
Doesn't matter. No, they're
okay.
pulling it up here. But it doesn't say one thing, or does it say anything to you?
So Harold, oh, sorry. Sorry.
So
So
the middle school staff response rate was just under 50%, 49.4.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, it doesn't matter to, I'm sure you're getting a big enough sample. I just wondered what that might tell us.
I can say that we just structurally what we did do was provide time either within faculty meetings or different times in the day that people could sit down and do the survey and encourage them to do that. The one I would say downside of this survey is the complaint you hear often is it takes a long time. I think it takes a good 15 or 20 minutes. Our teachers are very busy, so that may have had been some of it. Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I can just say I was a little disappointed. I was disappointed by that number as well. At the middle school, we did have a special advisory where staff and students had time during the day to take the survey. It could be, and of course the faculty could have taken it at any time because they had the link for several days. The only thing I can think of is maybe they were helping students at that time, answering questions, and maybe they didn't get around to taking it themselves. But we haven't met yet to discuss that and try to tease out why that is.
One other, at the beginning of the survey, staff has to self-identify what building they're in. We do have many shared staff across buildings. That may account for a few, I mean, it's not going to raise the number that much, but it may, you know, if somebody's also at the WIS, for example, and they identified that versus the middle school, that could have some small impact.
I just have a question. Will you use this as a template when you're kind of thinking about your professional development days in terms of what the teachers are looking to get a little bit more information on or feel secure on, or et cetera? Like, how are you going to use this in the future for them?
You know, I think a lot of that work will be done at the building level as they unpack their own results. There is a result of a lot of the social and emotional learning work that has gone on in the district, and I think that comes through because that does have a direct relationship to the school climate and culture. I would imagine, and the principals can chime in, that as they begin to unpack their building data and they see if there is an initiative they want to engage in to improve a very specific part of this in their building, that could be done as part of, you know, some kind of professional development, faculty meeting. But I don't know if anybody else wants to share on that.
Just preparing for the work with the climate committee, there are some great tools and resources that came to us with our information. There's some templates on how to develop action plans and how to go about unpacking that data. So I think the action will come as a result of the discussions about the data with the climate committee in each of the buildings.
Is there anything in the survey that, or is there anything that you feel the survey didn't get at? You know, things that you sort of wish you could have had. And I know you haven't dug into the data very deeply, but you know, reflections the teachers may express about the climate that is there anything the survey didn't really get to and you wish it had?
From the view that I've looked at, I think it gets a quite a bit. What I have seen, and to me, there's nothing that isn't present that I would like to see. I think what my experience is that when as the building teams get into it and they really dive into the individual questions and some of the subgroups, sometimes what a building might choose to do is convene a little subgroup of its own, sample discussion focus group kind of work to get a little bit more information about, you know, we have this result, what does this mean here? So just trying to dig a little bit that way to get a little bit more context to maybe some of the ratings that came out through the survey.
I know you had a different survey a few years ago, but is there any way for you to compare where we were to where we are?
Yeah, I think the best way to look at this is as a new baseline.
There's nothing that we could say we've improved or nothing like that?
I believe the last survey was a number of years ago, and I think that this is the best and valid data that we have right now.
What's the next step now? I guess the schools will unpack it, and then we'll get another.
We've discussed this a little bit, but I would like to see, I think, and what's reasonable is we'll continue to do the work at the district with the principals, looking at and they'll do that in the building level. Come back to the board, April, later in the year at some point. Maybe give an update as to what the action steps are that we've taken as a result of this. We will also be discussing with the principals how they're going to roll this out with their buildings. Is it with a PTO presentation? Is it a faculty meeting? Combinations? There's different ways to get the information out there. We felt, and Bill really guided me on this, that we have these results. They came in, I think, a week and a half ago, and we wanted to make sure that we got it out as soon as possible because people spent a good amount of time completing the survey. We wanted to make sure the data was very visible.
No, this is great. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions, but I really would wait until we kind of unpack the data to get kind of more granularity. Yeah. Anything else? No, this is fantastic. Thank you. Update on the school start and end time task force. Bill?
Yes, a verbal update, and Ken is part of that. Phil, we're trying to protect, so he's kind of in the room as he needs to be. Craig has actually been lending a little help because he was the real brain trust behind the survey. Mark Berkowitz is a numbers guy, so actually he and Craig are combining to kind of bring the survey to some understanding. But I can give you some indication of the survey, even though we've been cautious not to bring any one piece to you as a board, because we want to, in next month, bring you that recommendation in total with various pieces of analysis. But the survey is interesting. And again, it's not a vote. It's not the ultimate indicator. We did a very high response rate, very high completion rates of the survey. Craig can back me up on some of those numbers in a little bit if you want. But the combination of Craig's analysis and Mark Berkowitz, we have clarity, at least guidance from the survey, that 3 options rank highest. And that's not that you remember what the numbers mean, but overall it's 1, 3, and 4. 1 is stay with the current schedule. 3 is the 15-minute delay, and option 4 is the 30-minute delay, or the shorter day in there. Overall, not surprising, it tracks with almost any other community. 60 to 65% of the staff are very much hoping we stay as is. That was one of the strongest ratings to say, please, don't change. We like the current schedule. Students were very much balancing at about 40% saying we'd prefer really that option 4, that 30-minute delay, but it's really those top 3 I mentioned. And the parents are sort of comme ci, comme ça. It's sort of a mix. But what we will be doing in February is bringing to you not a single option recommendation, but a couple to consider, one of which will be the current. Ken's working on drafting the outline on that report, and we'll pull that all together for you. Depending on where things go with the budget, I think we do need to be thinking carefully about who's prepared to help guide this change, but those are things we can talk through with the board. So the idea still is to bring you a recommendation in February. There'll be some nuances to that recommendation, probably to say we're going to do a little more digging around these particular options, get a little more understanding. We were supposed to have a committee meeting last week. We had to delay it for budget reasons. We have one Wednesday, which depending on when you have your meeting, we may still hold. That meeting will be important because we'll talk a little bit more about the outline of the report. There have been some focus groups by staff. There was another follow-up focus group with parents. We want to get a sense of that. And those second round of focus groups were really using this more focused sense from the survey data of the various options. So that's a nice balance of the survey data guiding the work on the focus groups. In terms of what's happening regionally, New Canaan has been able to build into their 1.4 budget. I think it's $900,000 for their move on school start end time. Right now, it's the only district in the area making a move. Just to be aware, that's moving the high school to an 8:30 start time. It's moving the elementaries to a, that's not right, a 9:50. They're not starting, sorry, 9, go ahead. No, I'm sorry, the elementaries are starting at 7:45. That is right. So the elementary is starting at 7:45, the high school at 8:30. They have a very large middle school, so they have a split start. So the 7th and 8th grade will start at 8:35, and 5th and 6th grade will start at 9:15. The interesting thing on the 7:45, that's why I did a mental block, because it's that whole issue of do the little ones go early. They're neighborhood schools, you may remember me saying, and there's no bus ride in New Canaan longer than 20 minutes. So most of the pickups would be no earlier than about 7:20 for that 7:45 start. So I don't know, Ken, if you want.
Yeah, I will add that the 7:45 start for the elementary has been rethought. And Bill, this is very recent. That to flip-flop that with the 5th and 6th grade. 5th and 6th grade would be at the 7:45, and then the 9 something would be for the elementary. But the significant move is for the high school to go to 8:30, and the 7th and 8th grade to go to 835.
Yeah, so they were, in other parts of their budget, New Canaan was able to find some savings to let this happen. In terms of other districts moving on it, not seeing a lot of that at this point, but, you know, Western will have to make its own decision on this. So, I don't know, Ken, if you want anything else, Craig, any additions to the survey discussion at all? Lisa's part of that group, you know, done excellent work around the scheduling work, and Laura's as well. But I think, you know, we'll bring the report to you next month. Excuse me, the recommendation and report next month.
So it, you know, from what I'm hearing, the leading contender is no change right now?
No, well, if you, with the staff, very strongly no change.
Yeah.
It's a mix. I mean, the students prefer the 30-minute delay. Parents, it's kind of a mix, but there was a lean there at the 15-minute delay. So if the board listens to the survey, and we need to look at multiple indicators, obviously, not just the survey, but the survey would suggest either the 15 or 30-minute, and having to work carefully with the staff to say you heard their concerns about doing this, and how can we mitigate their concerns if this happens.
How does it break out between, just high level, between the high school parents and lower school parents?
It was fairly, I mean, we can come back. We'll bring
Yeah.
that to you
All right.
in the material.
Okay.
It was kind of at multiple ends of the various continuums. We can bring that back. to
Yeah,
the
okay.
report. Anything else, Ken, you'd add, or?
No, not at this time.
Phil, financial update?
Some more numbers. So this is our period 6. So this is the report halfway through the year, which on a theoretical basis would be roughly 50%. For a year-to-date actual, we're trending at about a 45% spend rate. We're currently at a spend rate of actual dollars of $24,059,635. We have encumbered 51% of our budget, or $27,301,338. We do have an anticipated spend as a hold to spend at 4.18%. Currently, we're still holding on to that end of year to be slightly over budget of 0.95%. And as we've spoke about multiple times, that has to do with spread-related costs. We do continue to monitor to find any areas that we can mitigate this current overage. We will bring forth recommendations, if any, sometime in about March or so of this year. In terms of transfers, we currently have 3 transfers. Oh, sorry about that. We have total transfers totaling $80,850. 3 of those were in excess of $5,000. The first is $55,000 to cover leave of absences at Hurlbut. Second is $15,892 to cover leave of absence also at Westburn Middle School, and $5,418 to cover non-substitute, non-certified subs at the middle schools. At the middle school. Any questions? Jumping ahead to the Internal Services Fund. Current expenditure from that fund is $228,230 from our opening balance of $1,537,357. We're currently have a balance of $1,309,127. And that is the end of the monthly report as of December.
We have a motion? Oh. Yeah.
Education approve the 6th fiscal 20 financial update.
Second?
Second.
Jana, questions?
Just a quick question, Phil. On the Internal Services Fund report, we have listed that we're going to have a drawdown of $300,000 for this year because of the AFSCME, ERIP, and the failed insurance buyout proposal. Is that $300,000 drawdown accounted for in the numbers? So is the 1.3 the projected balance with that drawdown, or is it really a $1 million balance?
I would have to double check, but I do believe that it may be all factored in. I have to double check the language on this to just to verify what exactly this refers to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Victor?
Yeah. Did I hear correctly that I'm just trying to understand the cadence that you said there'd be a recommendation in March?
There may be a recommendation in March. We continue just to find any savings that we could.
Okay.
It all depends on how the year progresses. There could be, but as of right now, we don't know for certain. But if there is, we're bringing forward recommendation to offset the current projected deficit.
Okay. I'm just wondering, once you get to March, how much time do you have to implement the recommendation? I'm just trying to think of that.
Well, in terms of the recommendation, that would just be transfers from any accounts to which are
okay,
we're
okay, got it.
right.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about it monthly with the Finance Committee. We've been in this situation. I mean, every district's in this situation every year, and we've been in it every year. So, we have every year frozen accounts starting in March, which might be one of the recommendations. That's tended to be able to generate it. But we've been talking about it every month, monitoring it, and can look at it more closely. But, certainly February Finance Committee will be talking about it, just quite regularly to see what's possible.
That's correct.
Okay, all in favor of approving the report? All opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll have a discussion and vote on setting of the Weston High School graduation date on April 1st, 2020. That doesn't mean that we're setting the graduation date of April 1st, 2020.
Yeah, right, and we'll have to correct the motion that you vote on because there's a different motion, but it's basically the language in the memo. And the memo is very straightforward. We had talked at length about this in December. There were a number of parents, others, given that the law had become more flexible in the state, that the old-fashioned way of wait till April 1, you figure out how many snow days you've had, then you can figure out the graduation date. The new law had built-in flexibility to set a date now. And as we talked to area districts, actually fewer than half have taken advantage of that. The majority have stayed with the April 1 date. It seemed that the sense of the board in December was, let's just stay with the old-fashioned approach. That's much better for the high school because we'd have to just keep pushing it out. We definitely have to have graduation on that last day of school. It can't fall earlier, or we won't be able to run a good graduation. So the recommendation is, and this would be a difference in the motion, would be that you move that the Weston Board of Education authorize the superintendent to set the WHS graduation date on April 1, 20, or as of April 1, 20. Your policy either has you directly vote on setting the date or authorizing the superintendent to set the date. If we authorize now, then we don't forget about it and go, oh my goodness, we didn't set the date or something like that. So there might be questions. I don't
Can
know.
we have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education authorize the superintendent to set the WHS graduation date on April, to set the date, or to choose the date on April 1st, 2020.
Choose the date. That's good.
Choose the date.
Second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruby. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion passes.
I just have a
Oh.
quick question. Dr. McCursey, it's just just to clarify. So every snow day that we have pushes our last day back one day. So I think this district has had, correct me if I'm wrong, one full snow day thus far.
Correct.
So I think the original end date was June 11th. So that's
Yep.
already now been pushed back to June 12th, and then we'll see what happens for the balance of the year. Correct? Okay.
Right.
There were some questions that came to me. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's not an autumn. Well, now that as of April 1, we'll set the date because there may be some other factors there. I think we're landing on a Friday now. There's been some discussion of whether that's ideal, though. We've had Friday graduations, I think, 2 times in the last 3 years, so it's actually worked. So anyway, but yeah. So as of April 1, we'll set the date. Work very closely with Lisa on that, and we'll report that to the board.
Thank you.
Louis, there's a bunch of stuff here now.
All right, I
On
promise to be
policy?
quick. So I'm just going to point out a minor stuff that we discussed at the last board meeting that's now incorporated into this document. So first off, my apologies, the cover sheet for the first item says it's 2002. I'd love for it to be 2002 again, but I don't think that's going to happen. My kids would be young again. So my apologies. In any case, so there's one thing on the sex discrimination, sexual harassment policy that I indicated we were going to change last time, and I did, and I don't know why it's not rejecting the change. But if you look right on the first page, it says there's language that's crossed out at the bottom that the conduct constitutes unlawful sexual harassment, a violation of board policy, whether or not a threat of adverse consequences is carried out, and whether or not the employee suffers any tangible adverse job consequences. Work, basically, they have a hostile work environment. That should be in there, and I mentioned that at the last meeting, and I just don't know why my track changes didn't work, so I apologize for that. But we will fix it when we finalize it. As I mentioned last time, the policy was changed and a regulation was created, which has a lot of the complaint procedure language now, which is very specific as to who should be contacted. Other than that, there haven't been any changes since the first reading to either the regulation or the policy.
Should we move to a vote or change? I mean, do we need to change it first, or do we just
No,
vote?
I think you'll just note for the record that change is a technical. It's literally a typo, because it didn't take the track changes. So I will fix that. So I would vote on these two items together.
Okay. Motion?
And I think hopefully the motion is listed as both items. If not, you can read both.
It's listed separately, but
Okay.
I can,
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can figure it out. Move that the Weston Board of Education approve policy 4118.12 and 4218.12, sex discrimination and sexual harassment, noting that there is a technical change to be made in the document.
Second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruby. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Lewis?
So we'll do the next one separately then, because
Yep.
they are broken down separately. So the next change this is your education records policy. This is a very big policy. The policy committee and the board at the last meeting reviewed all the changes. These are all changes recommended by your outside counsel, Shipman and Goodwin, through their policy service to reflect changes in the law. And again, there haven't been any changes since the board discussed this at the last meeting. And for those in the audience who may not know, we always go through 2 cycles before the board actually adopts a policy. So that's really all there is there.
Motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve administrative regulation 4118.12 and 4218.12, sex discrimination and sexual harassment.
Second? Thanks, Melissa. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Okay. The next item is related. It's the administrative regulations regarding classification of education records. So this is basically your guidelines regarding how education records are maintained, how long they have to be maintained. Class A records, for instance, have to be maintained for 50 years after the student leaves the district. That's a lot of your records. And it breaks it down by health records and so forth. And again, there haven't been any changes to this recommended regulation since your last meeting.
You have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve policy 5125, confidentiality and access to student records.
Second? Thanks, Taffy. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next.
Thank you. The next policy is a new policy. It's listed on the cover sheet as parent-teacher communications. However, some may recall in our last meeting I mentioned a technical change which has gone forward for a second reading, which is to change it to parents-guardian-teacher communications. We do have guardians in the district who are not parents, legal biological parent, but they are guardians or adoptive parents for that matter. So we want to recognize that, and also that provides that this is something we want for both teachers who are communicating with legal guardians as well as parents themselves. So with that technical change, which was discussed at the last meeting, there haven't been any other changes. That's it.
Can we have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve Administrative Regulation 5125, classification of educational records.
Second?
Actually, didn't you just do parent-teacher communications, which is
Parent-teacher
policy
communication.
61431?
It's-
Parent-teacher, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
parent
wasn't
teacher.
listening.
Oh, did
Yeah,
I go the wrong
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Yeah.
no, I
so
probably,
sorry.
yeah.
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve policy 6143.1, parent-teacher communications.
Second?
Sorry.
Thanks, Gina. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
The last one is the Board of Education's contracts policy, which hasn't been reviewed since 1990. It was discussed at your last meeting. We basically the policy committee discussed and the board discussed your last meeting. We changed the policy to reflect current practice and to also add the additional areas of discrimination which the board will not permit with regard to contractors that we utilize. Other than that, there have been no changes since your first reading.
Motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve policy 3324.1, contracts.
Second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruby. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Superintendent's report?
In the spirit of forward movement, I'm passing on the report tonight.
Okay. Committee chairs, anything to report?
Budget season.
Okay. Next regular session is February 24th.
Yeah, I mean, the main items there would be the school start end time report / recommendation. We won't yet have a preliminary from the calendar committee, right? That's March? I don't have the schedule pulled up in front of me. Yeah, so I think not next month, but March. Calendar committee starts meeting this week,
Okay.
but so in March. But the main addition beyond your normal meeting agenda items would be the school start end time.
Okay.
Tony?
One,
Sorry, just about future meetings. We have a workshop tentatively on the schedule
Right.
for
Yeah.
February 3rd. Are we proceeding with that, or we're going to
We've
take
not
a break?
discussed it.
yeah. Yeah, we haven't, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd really be up to you as a board. I know you were trying to get some time with Cade potentially, things
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
So
I
you'll-
think,
you'll come off a pretty intense month.
yeah, I think that there is some plans to do something with CABE on board development, but it's not going to happen until at least later in the month. So I'm not sure. I think I don't know if we're going to hold that. I mean, what was the original intent for that?
When we approve our meeting calendar each year, traditionally we have preemptively scheduled 2 workshops, one in the fall,
Yeah.
one in the spring, to give us time to discuss whatever initiatives or to have time for training or whatever. Doesn't mean we have to have them. It doesn't mean they can't be rescheduled. It's just we're a week out now, so if we're not
Yeah,
proceeding-
my vote is to reschedule because there has been some conversations I've had with some CAPE representatives about potentially some topics, but because of the heavy workload on budgets, it's probably not going to be able to happen until at least later in February. So my vote would be to hold off on this until we can nail down exactly what we want to do in that workshop. Okay.
So then the consensus I'm hearing is we would take February 3rd off
Yeah.
the books. So
Yeah.
Meredith will do that, because you also have a March 3rd workshop on the books as well.
Yeah, that might work.
So, okay, is that?
Yeah. Any other business? Nope. Have a motion to adjourn? Okay, meeting adjourned.